Welcome to Mid-Century Living, your weekly nostalgia podcast about the best of technology and culture from the mid-20th century.
Welcome to episode 34 of Mid-Century Living, the show where we talk all about the best of the mid-20th century and how to add vintage vibes to your modern life. We're your hosts, Jackie
and Gonzalo. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're talking about two partners in life and design, Charles and Ray Eames. But first, for a weekly catch-up, I just got a haircut, and I know you guys can't see it, but it is the end of the school year, and I always treat myself to a barber shop haircut.
Oh, nice.
Which is where I usually go to. I always go to the same barber, but this one was the haircut and the beard trim and the head massage and the face massage and
Is there a hot towel involved?
There were 3 hot towels and 1 cold one.
Wow, fancy.
Yeah. I know. So shout out to the bearded lady barber here in Houston because it was perfect, and I now look good. I mean, I always look good, but
That's a good way to treat yourself at the end of the school year. That's a good idea.
Yes, I always do it the first week after school's out, but I did it this weekend because I missed. Okay, I realized that I'm old and balding, but my hair still grows, and I missed my last time because I didn't book it in time, and I can only get haircuts on Saturdays because it's all the way down in Houston. So she was booked, so I was first available, which was today,
the 18th.
Yes, so it's a week before I usually get it, but I have my next one already scheduled because I'm trying to be proactive and more adult-like.
Well, that's good. So then hopefully it'll just put you in a really good mood the last week of school because you already got your fancy head massage.
Yes. The only thing I was missing was I don't know. I feel like I needed either a bourbon or a cigar to just
An establishment called the Bearded Lady sounds like it would have bourbon.
I don't know because I usually go in the mornings and I feel weird if I was to drink in the mornings. But there's a little fridge. I just never looked into what she has in it. Yeah, I've been going to this barber for the past 12 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So, but that was my week. How was your week?
My week was fine. I don't really have anything. Nothing really happened this week that would make for good radio. So,
I have a food talk.
Oh yeah, let's just do that. You go again. What's the food talk?
So, I got a cake at school. One of my classes got me a cake.
Aww.
Yeah, and it said "sorry for yapping" on top in icing because I guess I talked a lot. But it was really good. It was like a tres leches type cake with cream cheese. It tasted like cream cheese in between the layers because it was 2 layers. Which I've never had a tres leches that was layered, but it was good and it had this blue frosting on it and it looked really cool.
Cool.
And I should have taken a better picture of it, but I was too hungry.
Did you just go at it with a fork or?
No, I am a refined adult. I cut it into quarters and I ate it at once. I did share part of it with my next door neighbor, classroom neighbor.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Do you usually get kids that give you gifts at the end of the year? Or are they just out of there usually? Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Very nice of them. And now that I think about it, a couple of weeks ago, they're like, "Hey, mister, what is your favorite type of cake?" And I said tres leches. So now I was like, "Oh, you were asking me for that." It was kind of nice. It was very unexpected. I was not expecting that at all.
That's
nice.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I went to a Mexican restaurant last night, and they have 5 leches on the menu, and I want to know what the 5th milk is, but I didn't ask.
Yeah. My mom makes 4 leches.
Oh, right. Yeah. Because you said, 5 is 2 more leches. What are the...
So my mom makes 4. So it's evaporated, condensed, regular, and then whipped cream, heavy cream, which she whips into a chantilly style cream, but without sugar.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It makes it really cool because the cake is already sweet, plus the condensed milk is sweet. So having the unsweetened heavy cream made into whipped cream on top kind of gives it a nice little balance. It's not overly sweet.
Yeah, whenever I make whipped cream, I never add sugar. I don't think you really need to.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I will add like a drop or two of vanilla to make it, a little bit more than just milk. But I don't add sugar. But yeah, my mom's cuatro leches is really good, and it's so good that whenever she makes it for like my nieces when they're in town, we will have some, of course, for dessert, and then like we'll put it away, and then the next day at dinner, my nieces always ask for the leftover cake, and we're always like, "Oh no, there's none left," and as soon as they go to bed, we eat it.
Good for
So
you.
sorry, future nieces, if you ever listen to my podcast, that's what happened every time.
Yeah, you never get. That's why you never get leftover cake.
Yeah.
The adults earned it.
But yeah, that's about it.
That was fun. I'm glad we got a bit of food chat in.
Yeah, always have to have food chat.
So let's get on with the show.
Cool. So Jackie, you've
Yeah.
heard of the Eameses before. I mean, we've talked about them in previous episodes. So have you?
Yes. And actually, listeners, if you want a short preview, we mention them in both our MCM design and our MCM architecture episodes, which we will link in our show notes.
Cool.
But also, yes, I have heard of them, mainly by way of that lounge chair.
Yes.
But excited to learn more about them today.
Yes. Oh, and also a good plug. But for all of you out on the internet that may not be familiar with them, Charles and Ray Eames were a partnership between an almost licensed architect and an abstract painter in the mid-century. And together, they were at the forefront of the design, architecture, filmmaking, and furniture communities. So, Charles was born Charles Osmond Eames Jr. in 1907 in St. Louis, Missouri, and Ray was born Bernice Alexandra Ray Kaiser in 1912 in Sacramento, California. A little bit of background info on them pre World War II, because I have to bring a little bit of history in because I'm a history teacher.
Sure.
Charles remained in St. Louis until 1938. There, he studied architecture at Washington University in Missouri. Go Bears! But he never finished because he was, quote, too progressive.
Oh.
Yeah. He did, however, practice architecture with Robert Walsh, even though he never finished college. So that's a big no-no because you can't practice architecture without a professional degree. But
Ooh.
maybe things were different in the 30s. Well, he designed and built 2 churches as well as a few homes throughout the Missouri and Arkansas areas. And his work caught the eye of architect Saarinen, which led to a fellowship at Cranbrook Academy of Art in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. And this led to a very strong friendship between Saarinen and other architects at the time.
That's cool. I never really think about them hanging out like all these architects, like that they knew each other. That's cool.
I know. It's like celebrities.
Yeah.
He's also married and has a kid, but it's not to Ray, and it's not important, at least yet in the story. Suffice it to say that by the time that he makes it to Cranbrook, his marriage is kind of dissolving. But that's Charles. So Ray left California in 1933 to move to New York City, following an interest in fashion, theater, and the arts, to study at Bennett School for Girls. She joined Hans Hofmann's painting school, where she studied for over 5 years and became a founding member of the American Abstract Artists Group. And in 1939, she left New York City to go to Florida and take care of her ailing mother. And at this time, she applied to Cranbrook Academy to, quote, expand her knowledge.
Ooh, I wonder who she'll meet there.
I know, right? Who could be at Cranbrook Academy that's important to this episode? Yep. So Charles and Ray meet working for Saarinen's entry in the MoMA's Organic Design in Home Furnishings design competition. And wedding bells ring in June 1941. The newlyweds then moved to LA, to Los Angeles, using a bedroom in their apartment as their first office, where they begin to experiment with one of the things the Eameses are best known for, molding plywood into furniture. Or really molding plywood into things. Furniture is going to be what they do the most. And during the war, they put their skills to use in creating things to, quote, aid in the war efforts without hurting anyone, end quote, according to Ray. Yeah. And it is this key experimenting that leads to the creation of the Eames Office and also to the next 4 decades of design.
Cool.
Yeah. So the Eames Office mission was to produce high-quality products from readily available materials. Products all had what Charles called a way it should be-ness. Yeah. Products were continuously modeled until the final version was released to the public, then often were improved upon and then re-released even after the first editions made it out of the assembly line. There was incredible intuition in the use of color and form at the Eames office. Ray was quoted saying, quote, "What works good is better than what looks good, because what works good lasts." So Charles passed away in 1978, and Ray continued with the Eames office until ultimately closing the practice and dedicating their work to the future generations. And by this, we mean she donated 1.5 million two-dimensional objects. So think prints, photographs, that kind of stuff, to the Library of Congress. She lectured and welcomed students into the Eames house, which we'll talk about more later in the episode. And Ray passed away on the 10th anniversary of Charles' passing.
Aww.
So 1988.
There are so many works by Charles and Ray Eames that there could even be a whole series of podcast episodes about them, maybe even their own podcast. The Eames Office made significant contributions to the world of design and even continue to preserve and extend the legacy of the Eameses through today. For both Charles and Ray, the, quote, primary need of the human being was an essential component of every design challenge. Meaning there should not be an emphasis on financial gain or the desires of the ego. For example, Charles said chairs should not be made for how people should sit, but instead for how they do sit. So the Eameses carefully evaluated the genuine need of each client.
I don't have nothing.
That reminds me a little bit of not for how people should sit, but how they do sit. I read it, I think when we were researching the MCN design episode, that was it Frank Lloyd Wright designed like a 3-legged chair?
I don't remember.
And they were like really, really cool looking, but you couldn't lean. You had to keep your weight perfectly centered or you'd fall down.
Oh, yeah.
Because it only had 3 legs.
Yeah. So
And
that
so
wasn't
they had to
that was
scrap it.
meant for how people should sit with good posture, but in reality, you slouch and then you fall off the stool.
And then you fall down. Yep.
Yeah. So, but and we'll talk about several of their chairs and several of their products. But I wanted to talk a little bit first about some of the architecture stuff, because of course, being a past architect, I wanted to talk about case study house number 8, the Eames house, which we covered in passing in our previous episodes, but it was one of the over 20 houses designed for this case study house program for Art and Architecture magazine during the mid-century. So between the 1940s and 1960s, there was I want to call it a program of case study houses made by the Eameses. And they were all built, or they were supposed to be built and furnished using materials and techniques derived from experiences of World War II. And each home would be specific in its intention for its client or owner. So whether a real person or not, the houses were specific to their user.
Cool.
So house number 8 was designed for a married couple working in design and graphic arts whose children no longer lived at home. So, yeah, that fits the Eameses.
Yeah, so they made it for themselves. That's cool. Yeah, why not?
Exactly. So again, we mentioned it in passing in our previous episode, but it really is a huge part of architecture during the mid-century. Originally, it was a steel house composed of prefabricated materials, ordered from industrial and commercial catalogs, and designed in combination between Charles and Saarinen. Materials were purchased, and the design for what was called the Bridge House was published in late 1945. But due to war shortages, materials would not arrive until 1948.
Oh, yikes. Can you imagine waiting 3 years for your materials to show up?
No, because I couldn't wait 1 month for my escrow to close when I bought the house. But yeah, I know. It was funny that another problem came up in this time that they were waiting. So by the time the 3 years had passed, Charles and Ray had fallen in love with the meadow, which is the site that the house was supposed to go on.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah. So in the end, the Eameses built a house that did not interrupt the meadow and still used these off-the-shelf components, these catalog components. So The finished product was a reconfigured design into a two-story pair of structures, a residence and a separate studio. The house is tucked into the landscape's slope. The lower level of the residence has a living room, hall with closets, the kitchen and utility rooms, and a spiral staircase leading to the upper level, which holds two bedrooms overlooking the double height living room space. There's also two bathrooms, multiple hallways with closets, and even a skylight.
Nice.
Yeah. The studio, which is the second building, is similar but shorter in length. The ground floor has a utility sink, bathroom, a dark room for developing photographs, and a large open space. The upper floor here was used for storage, but sometimes as guest quarters, which kind of nice, kind of like you're gonna stick me in the storage. Thank you.
Just move the boxes out of the way and like pull down a
The hide-a-bed.
Murphy bed. Yeah.
The most distinctive feature of the Eames house is its 17-foot tall exterior facade, broken down into rigid geometric shapes made up of brightly colored and neutral colored panels between thin steel columns and braces. And incidentally, this is the part of the house that I dislike because in previous, this is what you like. See,
I like the whole thing, but I really like the outside, though. It reminds me of like a Mondrian print.
So I've made mention in previous episodes that I don't like. It's not my favorite architecture from the mid-century. And I was researching more for this episode, I realized why. It's because this exterior reminds me of my school when I lived in Mexico City.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So, not that it was bad; it was a good school, but great school. Anyways. The Eames house is considered the most successful of the case study houses, both as an architectural statement and as a functional living space. Possibly its importance and success is due to the fact that it was centered to the Eames' lives from the moment they moved in until their deaths. Yeah. And on September 20th, 2006, it was designated a National Historic Landmark. But anyway, that's the Eames house. So one of the most important contributions that Charles and Ray Eames gave the design world, apart from the Eames house, was the molding of plywood into different forms of furniture and also other items. So plywood is not exactly a new material to the 20th century. Its strong, lightweight, inexpensive qualities have been used to make furniture since the 19th century. And the Eameses knew that if they could mold plywood into compound curves, like in 3 dimensions, they had something going for them, right? So they developed the Eames process, where sheets of plywood were formed at the same time as the compound curves were imposed. And the first plywood pieces that they molded got their shape from balloons that Charles and Ray filled with air using a bicycle pump.
Cool.
Yeah. And this developed into their own homemade device called the Kassam, referencing the stage magicians who put one object in a box and pull out a distinctly different one and say something like "a la Kassam."
Oh, cute.
Yes. I somehow have the feeling, and I couldn't find this in my research, but I somehow have the feeling that Charles's daughter had something to do with naming that device.
That sounds right.
So during these molded plywood experiments, the Eames office produced a playful group of animal toys made out of molded plywood. They made bears, horses, frogs, elephants, and seals. Well, they were intended to make those. Mocks were initially prototyped, and the office produced 2 elephants and 3 horses out of birch plywood, but they were not commercially produced in Charles and Ray's lifetimes. Dun, dun, dun.
Which implies that they were later. I am intrigued.
Yes, well, we'll talk. Well, maybe we'll talk about that later. But before we do that, this molded plywood experiments also led to the first chair that I want to discuss. It's called the LCW. Actually, it's called the original plywood chair. So this was molded from sheets of veneer using thermosetting resin, and its seat and back from 5 sheets, and then its legs and spine from 9 sheets of plywood. And then finished with a resin sprayed on the surface. And this molded plywood, what we mean by molded plywood is, imagine if you guys out there on the internet can imagine a plywood like a flat plywood piece of wood. Um, when you get it wet and you apply pressure, you can start warping it. So it's molding plywood means that you are shaping the plywood into a specific shape. Um, so in the case of the LCW, these molded parts adhere to the frame by means of these rubber shock mounts. Um, and really, the level of standardization is just so supreme that these chairs have completely interchangeable parts. So you can move the pieces about for shipping or for storing. You can stack them. So similar parts also nest conveniently.
And
So
it's a very good looking chair.
it really is.
New versions were developed of the chair, notably the DCW, which is short for dining chair wood, in 1946, which is still made in the same configuration today. And it was made to go with the dining table woods 1 and 2, both of which were unfortunately phased out in 1950, 1951.
Yes. And the DCW and the LCW are very similar in look. They're both really cool looking. The table, I mean, I would like it as a set.
Yeah.
But before the chair even came about, the Eameses used their plywood molding skills in a very unique way. They took a stab at finding a solution that the medical corps was struggling to solve as they cared for the wounded in World War II. So the issue that they were having, that the medical corps was having, was how the standard metal splints used to brace wounded soldiers were causing further injuries due to the vibrations of metal during transport. So Charles and Ray took a stab at solving it and solved this issue within 1 year of looking for an answer. What they did was they created a plywood splint, and this splint conformed to the human leg, offering support through its natural form. And the duo actually used Charles' leg as a model, which apparently was an extremely painful process because removing the cast ripped out all of his leg hair.
Oh no.
Yeah. But this plywood splint has these symmetrical holes on either side of the molded plywood that are used for securing the leg onto the splint, and also relieve the stress of bending plywood so it doesn't crack. By the end of World War II, it is estimated that 150,000 splints were made. And this design and the use of plywood led to other wartime plywood items, such as an airplane fuselage, which is the body of the plane, a stabilizer tail, an arm splint, and even a pilot seat for the planes.
Cool.
Yeah. The Eameses also experimented with aluminum, which became more affordable after World War II. And we won't spend too much time on this, but the result was called the management chair. And it's aluminum side ribs that hold one-piece seat back cushions that create a flexible sitting pocket. And today, they are immensely popular in interior design, which is funny because they actually were created for, or they came out of a need for high-quality outdoor seating. But before I was a teacher and instead was an architect, our office's executive boardroom had a table with roughly 30 of these Eames chairs. And each are valued at $2,500. So I don't know if they're like legit Eames chairs. They by the images that I remember, well, I remember sitting in them when I worked there, but it's been a few years. But they look just like those. But yeah, so the management chair was commissioned as a special project for Aero Saarinen's Irwin Miller House in Indiana, which we talked about in our NCM architecture episode. If you guys remember, that is the one with the original conversation pit.
Well, we can't have a conversation about the Eameses without talking about the amazingness that is the lounge chair and ottoman.
I know. Did you know they're actually not called the lounge chair and ottoman? They're called 670 and 671.
I did not know that.
I'm not a fan.
That's funny. It reminds me of like Pyrex. They all have numbers at the bottom, and that's what people, like actual collectors, would be like, "Oh, I need a Spring Blossom Green Ford 15 or whatever." Like they just like stuff like that. That's what it reminds me of.
I want a birch and black leather 670 and 671.
Yeah, I like the black leather ones better too. But I always thought the brown leather one would match my house better. Not that I'm going to go out and buy one, but anyway. There is no denying that this is a luxury item that has all the Eames hallmarks, most notably the standardization of parts and humble use of plywood. The chair is constructed of 3 molded plywood shells and tailored with cushions wrapped in leather and mounted on a cast aluminum base. This is one of the most significant designs of the 20th century. It is not an inexpensive design, but it does provide a good value because they would be a lot more expensive if the design didn't use the standardization of parts and modulation. For example, the cushions can be removed and flipped around in case they become compacted from sitting, which is neat.
I love that.
But it is no secret, especially within the architecture and design field, but also throughout the mid-century cosmos of the internet, that Charles and Ray Eames have greatly influenced the world. In fact, Time magazine has hailed some of the Eames' creations as important items. In 1999, they crowned the LCW chair as the design of the century. Oh, I love that. I didn't know that.
So that kind of transitions us kind of nicely into today, because 1999 feels like it was last year, even though it wasn't. The Eames office, which was located at 901 West Washington Boulevard and is famously known as 901, was a 20,000 square foot space that served as the Eames' office for decades. And after Ray passed, the Eames staff continued operations in honor of Charles and Ray's livelihood and memory.
Oh.
In 1988, which was the year that Ray passed away, Charles' daughter, the daughter from the previous marriage, becomes the owner of the Eames office and declares her intention to continue their work. Today, they're based out of the Eames house and remains dedicated to communicating, preserving, and extending the Eames' design legacy. Their goal is to share Charles and Ray's goal and belief of, quote, positively impacting people's lives and environments. And they work closely with the only 2 authorized manufacturers of Eames furniture, Herman Miller Incorporated and Vitra International. They also curate exhibitions about Charles and Ray's work and philosophies.
An exhibition would be fun to see.
Oh yeah, it would. But if you don't have any near you, the Eames office does a really cool thing because they do these video series called Eames in 90 Seconds. And they're a series of web-based videos about different topics of the Eames work and are actually pretty cool to watch. So we'll make sure we link some of these in the show notes as well.
Yes, and there's a pretty cool one in there about the lounge chair and ottoman. And speaking of, again, of the lounge chair and ottoman.
You mean 670 and 671?
Yes, 670 and 671. The chair has become a status symbol and a design landmark. The Eames office now offers a tall version, since people are now bigger and taller than they were. You can purchase your very own lounge chair and ottoman on the Herman Miller website for a mere $5,795 for the standard size and $6,295 for the tall version, and they are completely customizable in wood and numerous upholstery options.
Yes, and also yikes, because that is so much money.
So
and
much
I want
money.
one so bad. But as mentioned earlier, Herman Miller and Vitra are the only 2 companies allowed to sell Eames furniture. However, in 2007, in honor of Charles' centennial, Vitra produced 2,000 plywood elephants. If you guys remember the toys from earlier on that never made it into production, Vitra produced 2,000 again for the centennial, which was 1,000 in red and 1,000 in neutral. And following this event, Vitra now sells versions of the elephants on their website.
Cute.
Yeah, the scaled down version in plastic costs $145 and comes in various colors. There's a regular size plastic elephant that costs $430, and then the original plywood elephant costs $2,250. Keep in mind, these are meant to be toys.
Oh my goodness. Hang on, I have to Google. Oh, they're beautiful though.
They really are really nice.
But I wouldn't give that to a child to play with.
No, but I can, if I had like, the only place I can see this being apt in my house would be if I had like a mid-century house on the hills of Hollywood with like big glass windows and like the gallery has like paintings and stuff and then like a little white cube table with like an elephant on top.
It looks like the full-size versions are big enough for children to sit on.
The original ones were meant to be big enough that small children could like jump on and like hide under.
Yeah, that's cute. Well, they're very pretty
Yes.
and very spendy.
So lastly, the Eames Foundation was created in 2004 by Charles' daughter, which we never said her name. Her name is Lucia.
Yeah.
And they're the corporate sponsors of the Eames Office, also Irma Miller and Vitra. They oversee the ownership, conservation, and the visiting of Charles and Ray's belongings, meaning the Eames house, which you guys can go and visit. It is in California, and it is open to the public 5 days a week, including self-guided visits, private tours, picnics, and more.
Fun.
Yeah.
I want to go on a picnic at the Eames house.
I want to go to it, even though it's not my favorite, because it's such an important part of like mid-century architecture and mid-century design that it would be remiss to not go and visit it. People out there in the ethernets, you need to see, even if it's an important piece of history, even if you don't like it, we need to explore it, because that's how we learn about our history.
Indeed.
And also, you go through every single door you can every time you visit a place until security tells you to stop, and then you apologize and you turn around and walk away.
Is that your that's how you tour architectural
Yes, I had a
landmarks?
college professor who said that's how you tour, that's how you learn. So that's how I do it. And I told my sister and her friend, they went to Europe a couple of times, and I talked to them. They were going to Rome, and they were going to go visit the Vatican. And I was stuck in passing. I go, you need to go through every door you can until someone tells you to stop. And they got in trouble in the Vatican.
Of course they did.
Because they went through a door and someone
You're
was like,
not
you can't be
supposed to
here.
go into. Yeah, I was trying to think of like buildings that would not fly in, and
The
that is
Vatican.
like even more extreme than.
Yeah. But now that we're caught up to the present, I think it's time for our etiquette segment. So, Jackie, what do we have today?
So, a few episodes ago, I promised that I would look into the etiquette for talking to strangers that was referenced in the travel etiquette, whatever episode we did that in. So that's what I brought today. It is not as exciting as I'd hoped, but still, hopefully, we'll see by the end of it if there's anything we can learn from this section.
Okay.
So, Amy Vanderbilt's etiquette book from 1951, she says, while American social customs are much based on those of the English, we never did care for the rule that says one does not speak to strangers without introduction, or permit strangers to open conversations except for some valid reason to ask a direction, say, which I think is snarky. But I guess that is the way the English act, but in America we don't do that. We talk to people, I guess is what she's trying to say there. On long train, bus, or plane rides, it's almost guaranteed that other travelers seated next to or facing each other will try to open a conversation sooner or later. So now we're getting to actual etiquette, though, which is, in talking with strangers, it is unwise to volunteer information about oneself, except in the vaguest manner. One rarely exchanges names or tells one's plans or home address. I'm shocked she said rarely exchange your home address instead of never exchange your home address. But another etiquette tip is that in conversation, if any, should be kept on impersonal topics. The weather, the scenery, perhaps the daily news.
Okay.
If you don't want to talk to a person, they should not be rudely snubbed. A book or a paper is always a safe refuge. And boorish indeed is the person who persists in trying to maintain conversation with someone who buries her nose in the printed page, or one who answers everything in monosyllables. So that's a bit of etiquette if you are the one trying to make conversation. If you get answers in monosyllables, take the hint. If you do engage in conversation and are having a good time, a woman must never accept the hospitality of a strange man by allowing him to pay for refreshments or a meal en route, or by accepting an invitation to lunch or dine when both reach a common destination. If the interest is really mutual and she wishes to see him after the trip, she can arrange for him to call when she will be with friends or relatives who can help appraise him.
Ooh, interesting.
That's a good little safety measure there.
Yeah.
She does say that it is, of course, dangerous for a woman to accept an invitation even from another woman encountered during travel. Yet, again, there are always exceptions, and one usually learns to recognize motives. So, a short but sweet etiquette segment. What do you think?
Yes. I like it because I am the person who talks to the people on the plane, train, and automobiles. I will spark conversation with anybody who is unlucky enough to sit next to me on the plane. And I've traveled with friends before who are very much against this, and like they sit down next to you or next to me, I guess, and like put their headphones on, and I'm like here chatting with everyone. But I've made friends. I made friends with a guy that sat next to me in a plane in December when I went coming back from a trip. I've got Facebook friends who I haven't talked to since it's happened, but like I met them on. I was flying from Detroit. No, I was flying from Houston to Detroit years ago, and I'm talking to the. I was on the aisle seat, and there were two people to my left, and they're talking. They're a couple, and they said something about being teachers, and this was before I was a teacher. But I was like, "Ooh, I'm part of this conversation." And as soon as one of them said teachers, a lady on the other side of the aisle from me was like, "Wait, are you a teacher? I'm a teacher." And then like they had a conversation over me. So then at that point, I was like, well, now I had to be part of this because it's like four people talking.
Well, that
So
sounds
I'm a talker.
Yeah, I am not. I don't like. I mean, I'm a talker. If I know you, I don't really talk to strangers. So I like her tips on like bring a book. And I guess the modern equivalent of that is like if don't talk to someone on the plane who has his headphones on.
Yep.
Or reading a book. Though I do know people, and I wish people would follow this one. So I guess we should give it the seal of approval preemptively. Who like will try to talk to you on a plane, even if you're reading. So they'll be like, "Oh, what you reading?" And like, mind your business. Like I don't.
Oh, wait, are you telling me that I shouldn't ask that?
No. Clearly, even back in the 50s, having a book is supposed to be a signal that you do not want to talk. You're reading your book.
Let me just be clear in saying that if I see you with a book, I don't keep going the conversation.
You don't feel like, hey,
and if someone, no, I don't ask that. And I do take the hint. If you are answering in monosyllables or you put your headphones on, I'm not going to be the annoying talker. So I agree with the tips. Let me just go ahead and say that. I think they should be approved.
Yeah, I think, these are good tips. One, she basically braces you at the beginning that people are going to talk to you. It's just going to happen. But then, gives you tips on how to get out of it, which is neat. I was really kind of hoping that the section would have more tips on... Well, I guess there's a little of that where she's like, keep it light and impersonal, and don't volunteer any personal information, which is kind of etiquette or helpful. Yeah. But I was kind of hoping for more conversation topics or phrases that you could pull out if you're awkward in social situations. But I'll have to do more digging into the etiquette book to see if there's anything like that in another section.
The way I see it is if I say something wrong, it's okay because in 2 hours, I'm never going to see you again.
Yep, so true.
So it looks like we landed the plane on this episode. And we've also landed the plane on season 2. So we'll tell you more about what to expect in season 3 next week.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the show and tell a friend. You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. This is the best place to send us feedback and episode suggestions. Send us a DM anytime.
Yep. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll talk to you again next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mid-Century Living. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave a review. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at MCL Podcast. See you next Friday.